So I'm sure there are many cross-shopping between the iPad 10 and the M2 iPad Air, so today let's compare them and discuss which one you should buy. Beginning with the design, these are both based on the same design we originally saw with the 2020 iPad Air 4, which in itself was based on the 2018 iPad Pro, but I can't blame Apple for recycling the same shell again and again because it's a practical design that works, the flat edges are easy to grip onto and of course helps accommodate the Apple Pencil, and it would be nice if the bezels were thinner, but ultimately they do serve a purpose. You can place your finger somewhere when holding the iPad. But coming to the display, there are some key differences. So both are 10.9 inches, LCD, have a resolution of 2360 by 1640 with 500 nits of brightness and supports True Tone. But the iPad 10 lacks an anti-reflective coating, it's not laminated, and also lacks P3 support. Now out of those omissions, the only thing that really bothers me is the lack of an anti-reflective coating. These panels are bright enough indoors, but if you sit near a window or you're outdoors, the display being super reflective is kinda annoying, I can't lie. Though yes, you can fix this with a screen protector. What can't be fixed though is the non-laminated panel, which of course does bother many, but it's not as noticeable anymore with this new design compared to older base iPads, though of course I do admit the pencil experience is worse. No P3 support though is a complete non-issue, and both iPads do lack 120Hz, which I know will bother the tech nerds, but I'll be honest, iPadOS is fluid enough where I don't notice a lack of 120Hz, and the Apple Pencil experience is unaffected by this. So yes, 60Hz is completely fine. There, I said it. You know what else I would be fine with, guys? If you happen to subscribe to the channel, of course, I would greatly appreciate it and would bring you the latest about Apple right to the subscription box, so please consider it. It would be appreciated. Join the Saranbyte gang now. Anyways, let's now move on to accessories because this is another big difference between these iPads. So beginning with the pencil situation, the iPad 10 supports the USB-C pencil and the first gen pencil, whereas the M2 iPad Air supports the USB-C pencil and the Apple Pencil Pro. Now the lack of support for Apple Pencil Pro on iPad 10 means it does miss out on features like a squeeze gesture to bring up a tool palette, a gyroscope that allows you to rotate the pencil for brush tools, haptic feedback, and also Find My support. But to be fair, if you use a stylus for note-taking, the USB-C pencil does the job for the most part, though I will mention the iPad 10 does miss out on Apple Hover, which the USB-C pencil does actually support. And I would 100% get the USB-C pencil over the first gen pencil because it's cheaper, magnetically attaches, and also charges via USB-C. That's the main upgrade, because with the first gen pencil, you have to put up with a stupid dongle. Keyboard-wise, the iPad 10 supports the Magic Keyboard Folio, whereas the M2 model supports the regular Magic keyboards. Now, weirdly enough, the cheaper iPad technically has the better keyboard because that has function rows, whereas the iPad Air's Magic Keyboard doesn't. But I do prefer the floating design of the regular Magic keyboards, also because it's been around for a few years. Remember, it was launched back in 2020. You can find this for much less from third parties. I've seen it for as low as $150, and the Magic Keyboard Folio hasn't seen as significant discounts because it's a much newer product. And if I'm being honest, the retail price for the Magic Keyboard Folio doesn't make much sense because why is a keyboard for a $350 iPad $250? That makes no sense. Ultimately, you should go for Logitech's offering instead, which gives you a very similar experience for much less. Performance-wise, we have A14 in the iPad 10 with 4GB of RAM, and M2 with 8GB of RAM in the iPad Air, and frankly, I was surprised by this because the M2 is 2 years old, and with the iPad Pro getting the latest M4 chipset, I thought that would pave the way for the Air to get the M3, but I guess Apple's done using M3 because it's based on the flawed M3B process, and so we're stuck with M2. Now, it's not a bad thing to be stuck with this chipset because it's perfectly good and gives you access to Pro apps, which of course the iPad 10 does not support. Now, do remember this only applies to Apple's Pro apps. You can still use Procreate and LumaFusion on the base iPads, and it does handle them well for the most part. And if I'm being honest, for regular iPad usage, the A14 is still more than fine, so make sure you know you're going to take advantage of the additional performance of the M2. If you're a student or you're just someone browsing the web and consuming content, the iPad 10 is plenty powerful, and because I'm a pretty light iPad user, I've actually been perfectly content with the iPad 10 for my usage. I don't need the power the M2 offers. Now yes, I'm aware newer chipset will give the Air the upper hand software-wise, both in terms of support and also access to features like Stage Manager for example, but considering A14 is still more than powerful for most people's needs, the iPad 10 should get another 3 to 4 years of updates. Battery life is surprisingly a little worse on the newer M2 compared to the iPad 10. I did pick up on the same with the M1 model, maybe it's the M series chipsets using a little more power, but for most people's needs, Both these iPads are good, but the iPad 10 does offer better endurance. The Air 6 does have a faster USB-C port, and whilst it doesn't offer Thunderbolt speeds, it transfers data up to 10 gigabits per second, which is solid, so transfer speed should be completely fine, and also does support displays up to 6K resolution. But if you're only using the port for charging like most people do, the USB-2 speeds on iPad 10 is a non-issue. Touching on the cameras, the rear camera is once again the same on both models, and I was certainly surprised Apple did not bother to add a flash on the back of the Air when the Mini has had one for years. But anyways, the camera here is fine. Apple does recommend you to add footage you record on the iPad to your Final Cut timeline, but please do not do this. This is not the worst sensor in the world, but it's also not that amazing. It should really only be used in a pinch for things like scanning documents. The front-facing camera, however, is great on both models, and is a massive upgrade for video calls because it offers center stage, so it follows you around the room if you move, and of course, they are both now in a landscape orientation. Speakers and mic-wise, there's no difference between these iPads. They're both very solid. The iPad 10 and Air 6 do not have quad speakers like the Pro models, but they surprisingly get close with 2 less speakers, and because it's a stereo pair, they're great for watching movies with, and mics have been great for calls. Moving to biometrics, they're also the same in this aspect, with both integrating Touch ID into the power button. This is something I do actually prefer compared to Face ID on the iPad Pro because I often manage to block the Face ID module when using the Pro models, and so I find it easy to just press the power button and boom, the iPad instantly unlocks. It's super reliable. The Air 6 does offer newer Bluetooth and Wi-Fi standards compared to the iPad 10, but there's not been a massive difference in terms of connectivity. Both have caused me no issues. Now, I will finally mention, yes, I'm aware the Air 6 does offer one crucial upgrade, which is double the base storage. It starts with 128 gigs now and also maxes out at 1 terabyte if you have overkill storage needs. But as a rebuttal point, I would say that if it needs a basic 64 gigs on the base iPad 10 is actually just about enough for most. I can certainly make do with it, but I won't downplay the storage upgrades. It was certainly needed. So overall, comparing retail price for the $250 price difference, the iPad Air 6 is kinda hard to justify. Yes, the M series chipset and display upgrades are nice, but for most people's needs, the base model does everything you need for much less. And because it's not a brand new product, you can get it for much less from third parties, so you could potentially save $300 or $350 getting the base iPads. And even if you're someone who needs the additional performance for your creative workflow, the M1 iPad Air, which is very similar to the M2, is often on discount for $400, and so you can get that instead. Also, Apple offers a refurb M1 iPad Pro for less than the S6, and that has upgrades like 120Hz quad speakers and Face ID, which some may prefer. And refurbished products, by the way, are basically brand new. They change the shell and the battery and the display, so basically everything you interact with is brand spanking new. But again, if you're used to just basic and you're just web browsing or you're watching videos, there's no point in splurging on the S6, just get the iPad 10 and you'll be very happy with it. In fact, also remember, later in the year, if you can wait, there's going to be the iPad 11, which will offer better specs for the same low price, and so you can consider that instead. But yes, unsurprisingly, the base iPad offers the best value. Also, the iPad 10 does hands down have the better colors. I mean, look at the difference between these blues. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you for watching.